Today is Monday, July 28th, 2026. Hey, Wati Missouri, and welcome back to The Greater Good with Sunny Peoples, the place where we explore the hidden forces that shape our relationships, community, and humanity. I am going to apologize in advance for this longish episode because today, for episode 7, we're talking about a powerful and painful phenomenon that has existed throughout history: the scapegoat. Most of us have witnessed it. Some of us have participated, maybe without realizing, and many have experienced it firsthand. A person becomes a target of blame, criticism, fear, and frustration. Complex problems are reduced to a single individual. The group finds relief. The scapegoat carries the burden. But why do societies create scapegoats? Where did the term come from? And if you've been a scapegoat yourself, how do you recover from the emotional wounds that follow? The word scapegoat has ancient roots. Centuries ago, a ritual was performed involving two goats. One was sacrificed to feed the community, while the other was released into the wilderness to carry away the transgressions of the members of the community. The people's wrongdoing, guilt, and moral burdens were transferred onto the animal, which was sent away. Over time, this ritual gave rise to the modern meaning of scapegoat, a group or person unfairly, unjustly blamed for problems they did not create and cannot reasonably control. Instead of confronting difficult truths, communities often seek a vessel in which to pour their fear, shame, anger, and uncertainty. The burden is displaced. The problem appears solved, but it rarely is. The question is not whether scapegoating occurs. The question is why it happens so consistently across families, schools, workplaces, organizations, and nations. Human beings are meaning-making creatures. And when something goes wrong, we instinctively search for causes. But real problems are often complicated. A family conflict may have developed over years. Economic hardship may involve multiple factors. A workplace failure may result from systemic issues rather than one person's mistake. Complex explanations require patience, curiosity, analysis, and resolution. Scapegoating often offers simplicity. The group can point to one person and say, "There's the problem." Suddenly, uncertainty decreases. Group members feel united, their anxiety temporarily declines, their own responsibility becomes easier to ignore. In this way, scapegoating functions as a social pressure valve. It releases the tension, but at someone else's expense. The individual becomes the carrier of emotions that really belong to the entire group. One of the most common places scapegoating occurs is within families. Sometimes a child becomes labeled as the difficult one, the rebellious one, the problem. Over time, every conflict gets filtered through that identity. If something goes wrong, the blame naturally lands on the designated scapegoat. What's especially painful is that these labels often persist regardless of reality. The scapegoated family member may actually be the one speaking uncomfortable truths. They may be the most emotionally aware person in the system. Or they may be different. When families struggle to address deeper issues, such as addiction, trauma, conflict, or dysfunction, the scapegoat becomes a distraction from the real problem. The family's attention shifts from healing to blaming. Being scapegoated requires a unique kind of psychological injury, creates a unique kind of psychological injury. When enough people repeatedly tell you that you're the problem, you begin to wonder if they're right. This can lead to chronic self-doubt, Shame, anxiety, depression, people-pleasing behaviors, difficulty trusting yourself, and a persistent feeling of being misunderstood. Many scapegoats spend years trying to prove their worth. They work harder, achieve more, become more accommodating, yet no achievement ever fully removes the label because the label, the role, was never based on facts. The scapegoat wasn't chosen because they caused the problem. They were chosen because the system needed somewhere to place the pain. Recognizing this distinction can become deeply liberating. If you've been a scapegoat, healing begins with separating truth from projection. Seek relationships with individuals who demonstrate curiosity instead of judgment. People who ask questions before assigning blame. People who see you as a complete human being rather than a role. Finally, recognize that healing does not require everyone to understand your experience. Sometimes the greatest freedom comes from you no longer needing your innocence validated by those who benefited from misunderstanding you. Perhaps the deepest lesson of scapegoating is this: the impulse to blame exists in all of us. Whenever we face fear, disappointment, or uncertainty, we can choose. We have a choice. We can search for something or someone to carry the burden, or we can confront complexity with honesty and compassion. The greater good is not served when one person bears the weight of everyone's pain. The greater good is served when communities develop the courage to face reality together. Without shortcuts, without villains, without scapegoats. Scapegoating doesn't only happen in families, it happens in societies. Throughout history, communities facing fear, uncertainty, economic hardship, or social change have often directed their anxieties towards a particular group, individual, or population. When societies experience stress, it can be easier to identify a person or group as the problem than to confront deeper systemic issues. The scapegoat becomes a distraction from examining uncomfortable truths. Questions such as, why are people suffering? Who benefits from the current system? What historical wounds remain unhealed? What changes are necessary? Are replaced by a simpler question: who can I blame? Who can we blame? In this way, scapegoating offers service to the status quo. It protects existing power structures by directing public attention away from the underlying causes and towards symbolic targets. When collective frustration is aimed downward towards the vulnerable, there is less pressure to look upward towards systems, institutions, and beliefs that may need transformation. The result is that the real problems remain untouched. The scapegoat may change, the suffering continues. Social transformation begins when we refuse the invitation to scapegoat. This requires a different kind of courage: the courage to tolerate complexity, the courage to acknowledge that many social problems do not have a single cause or a single villain, the courage to ask difficult questions about ourselves, our communities, and the systems we participate in. Instead of asking who should carry our fear, we begin asking, what is our collective responsibility? Instead of searching for someone to exclude, we search for ways to understand. Instead of assigning blame, we pursue accountability. Accountability seeks truth. Scapegoating seeks relief. They are not the same thing. The work of ending scapegoating is a sacred one because it asks us to do something profoundly human, to hold pain without immediately projecting it onto someone else. When we experience fear, disappointment, grief, anger, or uncertainty, our first impulse may be to locate a target. But transformation begins when we pause, when we become curious about our reactions, when we ask, why, what am I carrying? What is my responsibility? What pain am I tempted to place onto others? What truth is trying to emerge beneath the blame? This is the work of personal healing. It is also the work of social healing. Every time we refuse to participate in gossip, exclusion, demonization, or collective blame, we interrupt an ancient cycle. Every time we choose understanding over condemnation, we create space for something new. Every time we recognize the humanity of the person being cast out, we restore a piece of our own humanity as well. Perhaps the opposite of scapegoating is not simply justice. Perhaps the opposite of scapegoating is belonging. A society committed to the greater good does not need someone or some group of people to carry the burdens of everyone else. It recognizes that healing happens when responsibility is shared, truth is welcomed, and human dignity is extended to all. The sacred work before us is to stop asking, who can we blame? And begin asking, how do we heal together? Because when we free the scapegoat, we do more than liberate one person. We liberate ourselves from the illusion that sacrifice, exclusion, and blame can ever create lasting peace. Only truth can do that. Only compassion can do that. And only the hard and holy work of transformation can do that. When Jesse Owens won the four gold medals at the 1936 Berlin Olympics, he shattered Nazi claims of Aryan racial superiority before a global audience. Yet, when he returned home, he still faced segregation and discrimination in the United States. His story reveals an uncomfortable reality about scapegoating in social systems. Societies often celebrate individuals when they bring honor, success, or prestige, while simultaneously marginalizing the very communities those individuals represent. Jesse Owens was embraced as an American champion abroad. But Black Americans continue to endure systemic discrimination at home. Oppression, repression, abuse at home. This points to a broader dynamic. Sometimes the problem is not a lack of exceptional individuals. There's no lack of exceptional excellence. There's no lack of that. Sometimes the problem is a society that prefers success over symbols of success over confronting systemic injustice. The deeper lesson is that scapegoating protects existing arrangements. Jesse Owens' life reminds us that prejudice is not merely about individual attitudes. It can be embedded in institutions, customs, and social expectations. Even after becoming one of the greatest athletes in history, he encountered barriers that had little to do with his character or accomplishments. In many ways, Jesse Owens serves as a symbol of what social transformation requires. His life invites us to move from blaming individuals toward examining systems. The sacred work of transformation is learning to see what scapegoating hides. It is refusing easy explanations. It is recognizing the dignity of those who have been pushed to the margins, those of us who have been pushed to the margins. It is having the courage to confront the gap between our ideals and our reality. Jesse Owens did more than win races. He exposed the contradiction. His success forced the world to question narratives about human worth, superiority, and belonging. In that sense, his legacy challenges us to do the same work today, to replace blame with truth, exclusion with belonging, and scapegoating with collective responsibility. If scapegoating is the act of separating one person from the community and making them carry the burdens of everyone else, then the message we find in the music of Earth, Wind, and Fire points in the opposite direction. Their songs invite us to remember our interconnectedness, our shared destiny, our responsibility to one another. Scapegoating asks, who can we exclude? Community asks, how do we belong? Scapegoating seeks unity through a common enemy. Love seeks unity through a shared humanity. You could also connect it through social transformation. The sacred work of social transformation requires more than exposing blame. It requires creating a new vision of community. Groups like Earth, Wind, and Fire, do you remember? Have spent decades offering such a vision. Not through political arguments, but through music that celebrates human dignity, resilience, hope, and collective joy. In a community, in a culture that often looks for someone to blame, they remind us to look for ways to reconnect. Nature offers us an important lesson about blame. In a healthy ecosystem, no single element exists in isolation. Forests thrive through relationships. Rivers, soil, plants, insects, animals, fungi, and microorganisms all influence one another. When an ecosystem is struggling, ecologists don't search for one tree, one bird, or one species to blame. They look at relationships. They examine conditions. They ask what has become imbalanced. The health of the whole depends on the health of its connections. Human communities are not so different. Yet, when a family, organization, or society experiences stress, we often abandon the ecological thinking. Instead of asking what in the system needs attention, we ask who is the problem. The scapegoat becomes like a diseased branch identified as the causing a dying forest. But removing the branch does not heal depleted soil. Removing the branch does not restore damaged roots. Removing the branch does not repair the ecosystem. In fact, sometimes the branch we cut away was signaling that something deeper was wrong. Often, the scapegoat is the symptom bearer, the truth teller, the one reacting to dysfunction that others have learned to ignore. Whew, I can feel that. An ecosystem heals through restoration of relationships. Human communities heal the same way. When we stop asking who deserves blame and begin asking what needs care, everything changes. We become less interested in punishment and more interested in understanding, less interested in exclusion and more interested in restoration, less interested in finding fault and more interested in finding balance. This does not eliminate accountability. In a healthy ecosystem, every part has a role and every part has consequences. But accountability is different from scapegoating. Scapegoating isolates responsibility. Accountability distributes responsibility where it belongs. The sacred work of our time may be learning to think like an ecosystem, to recognize that none of us stand completely apart from one another, that our suffering and our flourishing are interconnected, that the people we are tempted to cast out are often the ones revealing something important about the condition of the whole. When we free the scapegoat, we do more than liberate one person. We begin restoring the ecosystem, the family ecosystem, the community ecosystem, the social ecosystem, and perhaps even our relationship with the living world itself. Because healing begins when we understand a truth that nature has always known. The health of the whole cannot be achieved by sacrificing one part. The health of the whole emerges when each part is valued, understood, and allowed to contribute to the flourishing of all. So perhaps the scapegoating is not simply about justice. Perhaps the opposite of scapegoating is belonging. Nature teaches us that a healthy ecosystem depends on our relationships. Music reminds us that community is possible. History warns us what happens when we choose blame over truth. And our own lives reveal how much damage is done when one person is forced to carry what belongs to the whole. The lesson of the scapegoat is ultimately a lesson about responsibility. Not the responsibility of one person, the responsibility of us all, our collective responsibility. Complex explanations require patience, curiosity, analysis, and resolution. Healing requires courage. Communities require accountability. Transformation requires imagination. And the greater good requires something even deeper: the willingness to see ourselves and one another, to resist the temptation to simplify, to resist the temptation to exclude, to resist the temptation to sacrifice one member of the community for the comfort of the rest. Beneath the health of the whole cannot be achieved by sacrificing one part. The family cannot heal that way. The community cannot heal that way. The society cannot heal that way. The ecosystem cannot heal that way. True healing begins when we stop asking, who can we blame? And begin asking, what needs to be healed? When we free the scapegoat, we do more than liberate one person. We liberate the family, we liberate the community, we liberate ourselves. And in doing so, we take one small step toward the greater good. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And until next time, be gentle with yourself, be curious about others, and remember, no one of us thrives alone. None of us thrives alone. We belong to one another.